In October 2023, I made a video explaining how the Dark Souls 3 Reverse Boss Order speedrun works. It's now March 2025, and in the meantime there have been many interesting developments. I hope with this video to go over them and show you guys how broken this speedrun managed to get. It's very interesting. So basically I will remind you guys that this speedrun is about fighting the bosses in the game in the reverse order. Unfortunately, it's not gonna be a perfect reverse order because we have to do some bosses out of band, and we will see this right at the beginning. The first boss, Iudex Gundyr, we have to fight him first. We haven't found a way to skip him in order to get back to kill him later, so we're gonna have to fight him right now. Another exception is Soul of Cinder, which we have to do in the middle of the run, because we simply have no idea how to access him before any of the other bosses. So we just resorted to, in a sort of a arbitrary way, doing him as early as we can. So the interesting changes that were made at this category are mainly circling around the ladder warp, which was a discovery by Elo in the past year. Which we will see very shortly. This early game is gonna be very, very packed with new and interesting stuff. So stay tuned. We're gonna see cool stuff. What we do now is grab a weapon that's normally completely useless, but it's actually very, very fundamental for our early game. It's the Broken Straight Sword, which you can find as soon as we leave the Iudex Gundyr arena. This weapon has the property of having the special move Stance, which we can access by pressing L2, and that's gonna be instrumental in executing the new version of the ladder warp. I remember that the ladder warp is a glitch that allows you to get in a particular state, which we will explain later, when you interact in a certain way with ladders. Specifically, we want to cancel the ladder climbing animation and keep moving about in the current world. So the game thinks we're actually on the ladder, and some rules get applied, while other rules don't get applied. For example, we're not climbing anywhere actually. Moving on to High Wall of Lothric, we are going now to grab another very, very fundamental item, which is going to be the cornerstone of movement tech. It's the longbow. You may want to say, why? What does it mean we're gonna move about the game with the longbow? How is it gonna influence us? Well, it will allow us to perform the so-called pivot sprint. It still isn't super clear to us why pivot sprinting works, but it does, and it's fast, so we use it. The technique is about having a bow in your left hand, having rested at the bonfire at an angle so that you perform a rotational animation that you will see briefly. Then performing a pivot animation, which is an abrupt change of direction where the character sort of breaks on himself. Then performing a standstill roll on top of that, which is a very, very precise roll where you roll and then immediately input a direction so that you don't walk in the meantime. And then pressing L2, forward, and B, or Shift, depending on whether you use keyboard or mouse, you end up with this super weird fast walking animation that's much, much faster than regular sprinting. So of course, like anything that is fast in a speedrun, we use it because it's faster. Just a few seconds after our first big glitch, we do another one. It's the ladder warp. As you can see now, I'm inputting L2 and then quickly pressing L1, releasing L1 and pressing A, 2 frames later exactly. This is useful for doing what I mentioned before, which is making the game think that I'm still on a ladder, but applying otherwise the rules of the normal game movement. I keep going with pivot sprinting and mixed with normal sprinting, just to move through the game, with the goal of reaching Emma, which is an NPC that has an item that's necessary for reaching the next area, the Undead Settlement. Normally we'd also have to fight Vort, but we decided we'd rather not do that, and we will skip him instead. We still need the item though. One of the effects of the ladder warp glitch that we just performed is that your stable position does not get recorded, which makes sense because on a ladder, the position is never considered stable. So since the climbing on a ladder state is retained up until you quit out, we can do whatever we want until we do decide to do a quit out, and when we spawn back in, we will be at the position where we initially performed the glitch. In the meantime, we picked up a few black fire bombs, which we will use to kill a Titanite lizard later on, and a couple of embers, which we will sell for souls. We finally reached Emma, which is the NPC that has the item that we need. Unfortunately for her, we will have to kill her. This will spawn the Dancer of the Boreal Valley, a boss which we are only going to fight later. We now grab the item, heal up, and quit out. We will spawn back right in the place where we performed the ladder warp originally, and we immediately perform another ladder warp. And now we will see the second property of the ladder warp. When you are in this ladder warp state, jumping while hitting a downward slope or certain kinds of geometry is going to produce a very interesting effect, which is you're going to just clip through stuff. We perform it here by casting Spook here, falling slightly down of that staircase, and rolling down. You may recognize the arena of Vorta just below us. We do perform the same sort of clip again. And we're now out of the wrong side of the door of the Vort boss fight. We now use the banner that Emma kindly gave us in order to move to the next area. And we quit out to clear the ladder warp state. Once we spawn back in, we turn around and light the bonfire at an angle so that we are able to perform the pivot sprinting glitch. Now we do a little detour, we cast Spook, we jump down, kill a couple of dogs, grab a couple of Valerian skulls, which we're gonna grab just in case, we don't really need them. But what we do need is Homeward Bones. We could have bought them at Firelink Shrine, but we're really strapped for cash right now, so we're just gonna grab them. By pivot sprinting, we move on and try to reach the next bonfire, which we're gonna use much later on to get to the second to last boss, which is Greatwood. But we do need to grab it now. Again, after we hit out, we activate the bonfire by sitting at an angle. This will allow us to go back to the pivot sprinting state, which gets cleared once we quit out. And we try to move past the area. Grab an Estus shard, another ember, and a couple of charcoal pine bundles. Bear in mind that this is one of my first few runs completed with this new route, and so it's full of mistakes, as you can certainly see yourself. Our remaining goal in this area is to reach the NPC Irina. She's an NPC that sells us miracles and a special ring that's gonna be the cornerstone for another one of the glitches in this run, which is the Teardrop, that you've certainly already heard about. If you haven't, Teardrop is a glitch that allows you to use the Tears of the Nile spell and diaphragm through the death plane in order to then survive in a state where you don't have gravity. Of course, like any self-respecting no-gravity state, it will allow us to go a lot out of bounds. That in turn allows us to do 90% of the job of skipping most bosses in order to do them in the order that we want, instead of the order that Miyazaki would want us to do them. You can see how extensive the use of pivot sprinting is, and I assure you this is fast. We just found Irina to our left, and we exhaust her dialogue and make it so that she moves to Firelink Shrine. We now managed to skip the conversation with the Onion Bro by just casting Spook, just jumping straight through in this elevator hall. We grab another Ember and dodge this Outrider Knight. Again, we light the bonfire at an angle, getting back our precious pivot sprinting state. And immediately use it to reach the place where we would normally perform Farm Keep Skip. On the way we stop and grab this soul for 800 souls. And we're gonna go to the dogs. It's gonna be very useful because there's an item there which is called Braille Divine Tome of Karim, which we will have to give to Irina in order to get our teardrop spell. Dogs are nasty. Use a safety skull here to distract the dogs, grab our Divine Tome of Karim, and make our way to Henry and Horace, two NPCs. We immediately attack them because we need Henry's weapon, which is the Henry's straight sword, which in this patch was particularly powerful because it had a hidden scaling on the luck skill, which governs the accumulation of certain states, for example bleeding. And in fact, bleeding is gonna be the key to most of our damage. We move to these recesses in the cliff, wait for them to come. And either one or two of them are going to fall down to their death. We're kinda unlucky here, only Henry came down. So we'll have to try and repeat this for Horace. It wouldn't normally be a hard requirement, but we can use the souls. We're done now, so we go back to Firelink Shrine for our first shopping spree. We sell the embers and the souls that we have. We now go to Irina, and we immediately hit her She will have to suffer an unfortunate fate as well. We give her the Braille Divine Tome, we buy a Saint's Ring, and the Teardrop spell. We then kill her to grab the tower key, which we will use to access the late part of the game very early. Now, in fact. We now equip the ring, attune Tears of Denial in the first slot, and Spook in the second slot. Ditch some weapons that we don't need anymore. And finally set up people sprinting again. We now leave from the back entrance of Firelink Shrine. As you can see from the X on top, we don't have the skills necessary to cast Tears of Denial, but we're not gonna let that discourage us. If we cast a spell, backstep, and then switch our spell and in the meantime press L2, we're gonna be able to cast that instead. We have known for a while how to do the so-called spell swap, but previous versions were much harder and much more precise than this. We get to our first teardrop. What we do here is we jump out of this place, knowing that at some point we will touch a so-called death plane. And we iframe by performing a standstill roll, which we can perform in midair. We used to do a much more precise and spectacular flankly kill for this lizard, but she's now here, like there is no reason for us to make it harder on ourselves. Our current objective is to lower our height just barely enough so we can reach the Untended Graves. A very peculiar and interesting thing that you can only see from this category is that the Untended Graves area, which is a very late game area, was probably intended to just replace Firelink Shrine in a sort of mechanic that's similar to War Tendencies in Demon's Souls. The speculated mechanic probably never came to be, but we are able to see that in the exact same geographical spot as we have like the Cemetery of Ashes, there is Untended Graves. And in fact, the boss Champion Gundyr, which is a version of Iudex Gundyr that we fought earlier, is there, in the same spot. We are now aiming to enter a part of geometry that will push us a bit further down, and we will see where that will lead us. We have now loaded the original Cemetery of Ash, which will show us a bit of geometry to guide us to where we want to go. Pay attention to the fact that it's day now, sky is bright, trees are visible. We're gonna use this tunnel to push ourselves further down and spawn some more geometry. Go through this hidden wall and quit out. Spawning back in, you will probably recognize the area. It's the area just past the Osiris boss fight. We grab a gesture that we're gonna use to go through another area in the game, and we turn around. See the sky? It is now black. But the area that we rendered from was still the Cemetery of Ash. It's now Untended Graves. Again, we'll add the bonfire at an angle, enabling us to return back here later when we will have to fight Champion Gundyr. And we just take a small detour to grab a soul packet. And we dash sign back to Firelink. We're now about to replicate the same teardrop as before, just with a slight variation. I swear this was 100% RNG. We're now going to aim at a slightly different spot. We're aiming towards those clump of trees that you can see in the distance. We're now going to touch a specific part of geometry to keep loading our next area, which is actually sort of the same as before, but from a different perspective. We are now on top of the Consumed King's Garden, which is the arena where we fight Osiris. Not now, of course, much later. We go backwards through the area, trying to find an elevator that will bring us to the Lothric Castle. We take the occasion of this short respite in order to heal up and catch our breath a little bit. This area is very scary. These trolls can follow you quite enough, and if you fail your pivot sprint, they're gonna be on top of you before you even realize it. We now climb some geometry in order to access the Lothric Castle bonfire, which will be the hub for at least 3 bosses. We keep making our way through this area, which is also pretty scary, because these enemies can just one-shot you or two-shot you. Luckily we have the Tears of Daenerys spell active, which means that at the very least we're gonna die in 2 or 3 hits. We light this bonfire out of safety. and we raise our height in order to traverse the next area. Usually we would quit out here, but we don't have a means to doing that now, so we'll have to think of something. To avoid the fire that these drakes are going to spit, we just zip our way through with pivot sprinting. I hope we don't get stuck in the meantime. We grab some money. We activate a shortcut elevator that will lead us to the armor boss fight later. And we climb these stairs to raise our height again. Now we must make sure to not touch any geometry if at all possible, because we want to avoid loading the door to the cathedral. We managed to not load the door, so what we'll do is we just go through it. Going to shoot this sage with a well-placed hit with our sword. And then I'm gonna kill this lizard with R2s so that we can stunlock it. She will drop a Twinkling Titanite, which is gonna be like the item that allows us to level up our weapon. We grab more souls. And we go ahead and kill another lizard with a charcoal pine bundle, for the same reason as before. Twinkling Titanites. Instead of going through the archives as normal, we use the fact that we don't have gravity to raise our heights repeatedly until we can get to the target area that we're seeking for. We should be able to raise our height on this beam here, but it doesn't always work. We still managed to somewhat make it to safety though. We avoid some enemies, and coming up is another instance of ladder warp. This time there's a slight difference, and a very interesting one at that. When you combine the property of the ladder warp of allowing you to clip the geometry with the property of not having gravity of Teardrop, you have that you can sort of strategically get below certain items that you would normally not be able to do so. We grab more Twinkling Titanites and move on. Being very careful about this enemy, we grab another item. And we keep moving towards Princess. You're noticing that I'm not pivot sprinting everywhere here, but only in certain places. Because something scary can happen. Something scary which we'll actually use to our advantage now. Another interesting property of pivot sprinting mixed with Teardrop is that if we do run head-on into a wall with pivot sprinting while we are in this state, our height will be lowered, like this. We're now below the level of Princess's Arena. Funnily enough, the boss fight trigger is still accessible from this height. So we touch it and commence the fight. As soon as the cutscene ends, we turn around, aim towards the chair, and do a pivot sprint. See what happened? We lowered ourselves below the ground. And since this boss has the funny habit of teleporting, we had him teleport to our place, fall into its death. We need to wake the phase 2 boss again, because like right now it's not seeing us, so we do that with an arrow. We now quickly wanna move towards a certain spot, because like otherwise like the boss can teleport to us and do some damage. But if we move fast enough, he's not gonna hit us. We stop roughly around this spot and wait for him to teleport again and fall finally to its death. Takes a while, but it's super funny to see. Because Princess is gone, we have one thing left to do in this area before moving on. At the bottom of the very deep elevator, there is a Titanite slab, which is like the final upgrade for our weapon. At the time of recording this, I'm still kinda winging this pathing here, so I'm kinda like moving about in the dark, and as you will see, I will take my sweet time and make a big mistake that will cost me literal minutes. But anyway, we found the elevator, and we try and go down it. Something incredibly funny happens that I need to look into. For some reason I was like pushed down the elevator shaft by walking this way. This locked me out from being able to like ride the elevator down, because now I haven't activated it. I should have activated it at the top, but I didn't. So now I'm scrambling to actually try and go further lower by using the ladder warp state, which we're still in, by the way. Feel free to skip ahead a minute. Finally managed to pivot sprint my way out of the under the elevator and into the shaft. But soon, as you will see, I will commit a grave mistake. As I'm backstepping into the wall, I didn't realize that you can also actually get stuck below the floor if you backstep too much this way, and I also touched a death plane, so this made it impossible for me to continue and grab the item. I'm spawning again at the top of the ladder where I did the ladder warp. Feel free to skip the next 2 minutes as I make my way through the area again in order to reach the elevator and go down again. Yay, we did it! Time to go back to Firelink Shrine. We got 85k souls on Princess, so we're definitely gonna use them to avoid like losing them on the way. They're pretty important. Ultimately though, this is non-optimal, and in an ideal setting it would be skipped and the level up is going to be done much later, after unlocking a larger part of the map. Warping out to Road of Sacrifices, we get ready to traverse a very big part of the game, all the way through the to the Great Belfry bonfire at Archdrake Peak. Here we perform the original teardrop setup in this spot. The setup here is where the glitch originated all the way back in 2016, where it was originally discovered nearby Farronkeep Skip. We drop down, being careful not to die, and we see that we have a death cam here, so we quit out to delete that state. That is also the reason why I didn't bother setting up the pivot sprinting. Quitting out would have deleted it. We perform a spell swap, and we die again. Again, we perform a spell swap, throw ourselves in a certain kind of way off of that cliff. As you can see, or rather not see, we are invisible now because we already lost the teardrop spell state, but we are no longer bound by the gravity. So we move into a position here that gives us an ideal height to go past the locked door in Faron Keep. You may wonder what we are actually doing here. Truth is, like, we sort of know where to go and how to move in order to load certain parts of the map, which I've done now. As you can see, like, the map just spawned back in under our own eyes. We lighted bonfire at an angle again in order to enter into the pivot sprinting state. And do a series of moves for raising up our height and allowing us to go out of bounds immediately again. Here I perform another spell swap just to have the teardrop state active and so I can see where I am. We're now out of bounds and we will have to be careful to touch some very specific spots in order for us to have a load trigger available a bit later. Otherwise, if we don't have that, we won't be able to move on to the next area. So this raised part of the ground is the first one. We want to push against the wall a little bit just to make sure. And this other corner right here is the other one. We now walk below the ground to lower our height. We can safely do that with pivot sprinting to go fast. Once we are low enough, we can turn around and move below this other tunnel and go against the wall again in order to further lower our height. We want to use those candles, making sure we are just below them in order to be at a satisfactory height for our next part. Once we do, we can start pivot sprinting against the cloud, waiting for a certain game element to appear, a beam of light. You will be able to see it shortly. There we go, it just appeared, so now we turn left and touch a load trigger. Touch another load trigger to finish loading the map. And we go all the way back here to grab the Grave Warden's Ashes, through which we will be able to buy some Carthus Rouges, which are the buffs for our weapon. Now we have to be very careful to touch the things that we are supposed to touch in order to load these other parts of the map. Otherwise we risk crashing. We don't want to do that. Otherwise we'll have to go and start over. We are on a route above the Volnir arena. In fact, what we are performing now is called Volnir's Keep. We do want to find a small opening in the collision that we cannot see actually, and we can squeeze through it to just move past the whole area and move into the Irithyll area. We light this bonfire and stay in Teardrop in order to continue moving past this area again. We perform the backstep pivot sprinting in order to lower our height here. Then move on to the area where there will be the distant manor bonfire. Once you're here, we exploit the vertical wall of this building to further lower our height. And then we move again into another building and repeat the same. Now we want to push the backstep pivot sprint as far as we can so that we end up below the collision that represents this building. There we are. We continue our backstep pivot sprinting to lower our height against another piece of collision that you cannot really see, but it's just like a vertical slab of geometry. Again, we push against it until we are below it. And from there we keep sprinting forward. We should now be able to see that long column, which is like an elevator shaft. And so we continue pushing our heights down in the same way. We also want to go below it. Once we make it through, we look towards our northeast and we see like a weird shape floating in the air. That's actually the target that we want to reach. As soon as we do, we have spawned in Profane Capital. We climb the stairs here. We climb another set of stairs, but first we have to lower our height. And then we grab the bonfire and the item that's next to it. We will return back to this bonfire when we have to fight Yorm, which is the boss of this area. But for now, we're going to move towards the Archdragon Peak area. We do a short detour to grab more souls. Being very careful because you can get stuck into geometry here, we climb this flight of stairs. And we zip through these jailers. Remember earlier when we went to Untethered Graves, we grabbed a gesture? We are using it now in order to travel to Archdragon Peak. This area is also very scary for the same reason as always. These enemies hit very hard, and if you make a mistake in pivot sprinting, this happens. Once we are safe from all the enemies, we can raise our height again a little bit, and once we get a little break from all of these, we can cast Tears of the Nile again and get back into the state. We climb over this section with the objective of reaching the place that we would normally reach after the non-fight with the Wyvern. Our goal here is to further raise our height so that we can go grab some Twinkling Titanite, which again will be very useful for leveling up our weapon. We exploit these Phyto Stairs for raising our height, and we point towards where we know that there is going to be an item. We lower our height here. Try to safely move past this enemy, which is called Chain Snake, because he is a snake with a big chain that hurts a lot. And turn the corner to a bonfire. We will later use this bonfire in order to reach the Wyvern. You're about to meet a Titanite Lizard, which is going to fall to its death because it's pretty easy to manipulate. It just like escapes from you, so if you put it at an angle, it will fall to its death. Grab a soul here. Normally we'd have to face a Wyvern here, but we can just like go around it since we are like in no gravity mode. We strategically raise our height here and try to move on the outside in order to get back in a short bit. We don't have to kill this lizard, but it will do it by itself, which is very convenient to us because it is hard. We used to climb this set of stairs to get our Titanite slab, but we already get one, so we don't need it. So we grab more Titanite, Twinkling Titanites, and we move on. Try to lower our heights in order to reach an item that we can grab right here. And we are finally done with opening up the world. Like now, at this point, you can just go back to Firelink Shrine, level up, and start fighting bosses already. You first of all give out the Umbral Ashes that we've collected earlier during the teardrop, and sell all the soul items that we have. Buy 11 Cartus Rouges and 11 Homeworld Bones. We don't need exactly 11, it's just faster to do it like that. We move on to Andre, we level up our weapon to +5, and we use the Estus shard that we grabbed before. Use the remaining souls that we have to level up luck to the 36. Coming up is Armor, our second boss fight, but we're actually gonna take a small detour first. If we go in this spot in the Irithil area, we can make this giant lizard spawn. Luckily, just a few well-placed headshots will take care of it, and it will drop a ring that's gonna like aid us in dealing damage. It's not a huge change, just a small convenience. We're now back to the Lothric Castle bonfire, where we rest at an angle again to activate Pivot Sprinting, and Pivot Sprint towards the boss. We ride the elevator that we activated earlier. Here I try and fail to perform a staff buff, which means like you do a pivot, which I fail to do, then cast the staff buff, which would cast itself, but in the meantime we are able to switch our weapons, so we would get the buff on the weapon instead. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get that. Fight this boss in the usual way. You try to bait his two attacks that you can strafe very easily. Bring into his face change with a number of specified hits. Then stagger him and try to finish him off. Someone in chat supposed that this double death was actually intended. It was not, I just suck. Feel free to skip ahead a minute and a half as I go and recover my souls. Back to Firelink Shrine. We level up luck in order to reach 41. We now get ready to tackle our next boss, Champion Gundyr, in the Untended Graves area, which we unlocked earlier. It's one of the rather long sections of pivot sprinting that we can do while trying to fight, or rather trying to dodge very, very dangerous enemies. In the arena, we cast Safety Tears of Denial. We buff our weapon with the Cartus Rouge and bring out our shield, which we will use for ferrying. We hit the boss 5 times, then parry him, and another 2 times. He will now phase change. You can roll into Desire of Effect, and as soon as he's done, immediately start attacking. This will stagger him. Luckily enough, he did a parryable attack, and he died. We can now level up some vigor and some endurance in order to be able to do a 6-hit combo. Moving on to the Nameless King, we again cast Tears of the Nile and go fight him. This fight is not super notable, you just perform it like you were an honest gamer. Once the boss is gone, we wanna quit out. Once we cancel the cutscene, we can activate a bonfire and travel to a couple bonfire upwards, so we can go to fight Wyvern. The Wyvern fight is kind of peculiar. We don't actually, we are actually meant to face it after traversing the entire area and just falling onto his head and performing a drop attack, but we don't do that. The game allows us to actually do a drop attack from standing here from any sort of elevated surface when falling down. So we find a conveniently placed wall and use that to jump on the head of the Wyvern. It's gonna take a couple of attempts. With the Wyvern dead, we grab a ring and quit out, otherwise we would be teleported, which is a slow animation. We walk again to Lothric Castle and get ready to fight Osiris. As before, rest sideways to activate pivot. And traverse the area we came from in the beginning in reverse order. Go through this shortcut. And ride down the very elevator that brought us back here. in the first place. Again, no particular technique to fight this boss, we just wanna be as close to him as possible and try to track his movements. He moves around a lot, so we are going to end up expending a significant amount of stamina. There are stunlock strategies with this boss because his head is very vulnerable, especially in phase 2, but we haven't routed them in. Warping back to the previous bonfire, we conveniently are exactly where we need to be, above the dancer. Now you remember we activated it earlier on, at the very start of the game, when we killed Emma. Well, we find Dancer standing there, just waiting for someone to come. So we buff our weapon, and do some hits. Now something that many players may not have seen is what a stagger looks like for Dancer. In fact, safe areas for fighting her usually don't put you in the position of being able to hit her head many times. But when you do, she opens up to a riposte that's very spectacular. We now light the bonfire and move on to the next boss, Yorm. We need to go back in teardrop state, so we're going to cast Tears of the Nile here. Sleep at an angle, as we also gonna need pivot. And try to precisely drop down in this spot, so we don't fall down, but we end up on a ledge. Being like a centimeter in the wrong spot would make us fall down. So it's pretty precise. Use a vertical wall to lower our height again with the same method as before. And once we are at the desirable height, we can move on and move towards where the boss fight is. Again, we use the backstep pivot sprinting technique to lower our height and bring it to a level that's desirable for us. You have to be careful to not go too far down, otherwise we may trigger the boss fog wall. As you can see, there's no fog wall in the boss arena, so we're gonna take the chance to move past it. Once we are close to the throne again, use a technique for lowering our height and spawn the boss in the arena. Boss AI is not active though, so we're gonna fight him this way. Interestingly enough, we cannot even lock onto the boss, so we have to manually aim the attack. And with your gun, we get ready to go to Aldrich. Back to Irithyll, we will try and perform another teardrop by falling down here, doing a standstill roll, and entering teardrop. We climb all the way up until Ranor Rondo. Now we want to make sure that we are aligned with a certain brick on this wall, so that we know that we are at the proper height. That will both allows us to climb on top of a roof and also avoid a death plane that would be slightly above us. Have to be very careful nearby these knights. They're not fooling around. We now climb this buttress. Notice what happens to our health. We actually touched a death plane but haven't died fully. Luckily we have the Ahri straight sword, which like heals 1 tick every second, so we're still able to live. On top of that we also have the teardrop. We touch this bonfire that will allow us access to the next boss. We keep climbing, staying out of bounds, in order to reach the boss fight arena of Aldrich. Of course we don't want to enter it, we just want to stay below, as the boss's body is below ground and we can still hit it. So we perform the backstep pivot and try to get below the arena. Once we manage to do that, it's open season to the boss's lower part of the body. We now bomb back to avoid being teleported to the dancer arena, which will be pretty awkward. If we cast Spook here and throw ourselves down, we won't die, at least not immediately. But if we quit out, we can spawn back into the lower level that we went through before. We are actually still not inbound, so the geometry is kinda wonky here, and I end up being stuck in that part and having to bomb back again. And repeat the jump. Now, having performed the jump correctly, we roll off and we make sure to avoid the same knights that we faced before. We have to avoid the fireballs here. And we can enter the Pontiff's Arena from a shortcut. We immediately use a Cartus Rouge and go fight him. Not much to the fight, as you can see, as the boss's AI has not been activated because we haven't gone through the fog wall. We light the bonfire and warp back to Irithyll, where we will again perform a teardrop. This time though, we're taking the opposite direction as before. We're going to try and lower ourselves and reach the arena of the boss Volnir, which we've skipped before. Once we open the door, we quit out and get off of a teardrop state. In fact, the boss's arena is sloping downwards, and that will be pretty bad for us, as we wouldn't be able to hit him. We're so powerful now that we can just make short work of the boss. 2 hits for the first bracelet, 3 hits for the second one. And again, just a couple for the third one. And when this happens, you get a super fast, quick kill. We're now gonna descend towards the next boss, Old Demon King. Actually, like, Old Demon King and Volnir are available to be fought at exactly the same time according to the regular game progression. We just arbitrarily decided to do one instead of the other first. We touch this bonfire to enable pivot sprinting, and we move towards the boss arena. Pivot sprinting here is very not fun, because you have to perform it correctly, otherwise you will get insane damage coming from the balliste. Anyway, you wanna get into a specific area and then quit out to de-aggro this enemy. Regularly this boss is considered a pushover, but for some reason in this category it's pretty hard. Like, we don't have a lot of health by this point, and the boss hits inexplicably hard. So what we want to do is reach him with full stamina, do 6 hits, and remembering that he staggers at the 8th hit. Then be mindful of when his face changes, which is this animation here. Try to correctly manage the stamina and hit him. Here I had to move away from him because he launched an attack that would have killed me if I stuck around too much. And I go in for one last hit. We now move on to Watchers, the last Lords of Cinder. Again, we just pivot sprint towards the arena. Fight here is pretty trivial, but they still pack quite a punch. Our weapon packs a punch as well too, so it's enough to hit them 6 times for a phase transition. Phase 2 is not that impressive, same 6 or less hits finish. We finally have the souls of the 4 Lords of Cinder, and we can put them on the thrones, which will give us access to the final boss, Soul of Cinder. As this is the earliest possible time we can fight him, we will go and do that now. We'll equip a Homeward Bone and try to spam it during this cutscene, since even if we're not seeing anything, we can still use items. If we do that, we are going to skip the next sort of preparatory area before moving on to Cinder. And we spawn back in the Kiln of the First Flame directly. We activate Pivot Sprinting and reach the arena. Now of course it wouldn't be RBO if we hadn't had a massive glitch here. You noticed that I've touched that specific part and activated the boss's AI and quit out. Turns out that there is a spot of stable ground inside of the arena, and once the AI is activated the first time, we can spawn back in and fight the boss without his AI activated, which is, suffice to say, pretty simple. Once we're done with this boss, we conveniently spawn right next to the Firekeeper, so we will just use some of the souls that we have accumulated over time to level up a little bit. Hypertrophic health bar is the wet dream of any Dark Souls 3 speedrunner. We move back to Road of Sacrifices in order to, again, redo a slightly different version of the teardrop that we've done before. This time around, we touch the bonfire, activate Pivot Sprinting, and we keep going in the opposite direction. We are going towards the arena of Crystal Sage and the Deacons, not in this order. Here I had one of the usual fun encounters with dogs, which lost me a lot of time. But anyway, the objective is to light that bonfire. Once we finally manage to do that, we are ready to move on. We're going towards the arena of the Crystal Sage boss. But of course, now is not the time, as there is another boss that comes later, which is Deacons. So now we try to raise our height, climb on this wall, and leave the arena. Once we've done that, we have to reach the arena of the next boss, which is the Deacons. We just make our way through this area. Again, dealing with dogs in this game is extremely fun. As I make my way through this, I just remember that I didn't explain this before, but basically dogs, when they are not into view, are super fast, because the game just updates enemies' positions not at 60 FPS when they are not in view, but like once a second. And the dog's normal speed is so high that they can, their calculation kind of gets out of whack, and they just literally teleport on top of you. Anyway, as we're safe from the dogs, we make our way through this sort of maze of trees and so on. We really want to be mindful not to touch too many trees and keep our height high enough so that we can run into the Deacon's Arena slow trigger and activate it. Now, having our height a bit higher wouldn't be a problem, as we can just do our pivot backstep and to save the day, but there is an optimal height there, and we have found it. In the spirit of cheating until the end, we also do not really fight this boss. Phase 1 we just hit him 4 times from below by two-handed war weapon. And the second phase cannot hit us either, because they're all up above the ground. They can hit us with force and stagger us, but cannot deal real damage. Funnily enough, notice that the Crystal Sage health bar was still present. Which is a good thing, because it reminds us that now we have to fight him. And so we move back towards the arena. We don't have Teardrop anymore, so we take a slightly different route than before. Not much to say about this boss. Just takes it and dies. Notably, it will teleport as soon as you start hitting him, but you can like put 5 hits in before that happens. Now if you observe the patterns of these crystals spawning from the ground and go where there are none, you can find that it will spawn here. And you can finish him. We now are back to the Undead Settlement to go find the second to last boss, which is Greatwood. We're just gonna make our way through the area with pivot sprinting. Couple of minutes later, we are in the boss's arena. With pivot sprinting, we managed to reach him so fast that he cannot complete his opening animation, and we can start hitting him immediately. So we start with the belly sacks, then the leg, and then the hand. Then we move into a position that will convince him to immediately phase transition, which is very convenient for us because we like speed. We finish him off by hitting the leg sack here and the belly sack again. 3 times. Now we bomb back and immediately warp to the Dancer of the Boreal Valley bonfire for our final boss, Bort, which we skip all the way at the beginning of this run. In a pretty anticlimactic manner, we just enable pivot sprint and go towards the boss as fast as the tech will allow us. Once the boss fight starts, we can just pivot sprint again into him, defeating his legendary backstep by just running faster than him, and hitting him 7 times, so that he dies. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was Dark Souls 3 Reverse Boss Order. Hope you enjoyed the commentary. If you have, feel free to swing by my Twitch channel or subscribe here on YouTube. Best of luck and have a great day. Bye!